So today we begin a new message series which we're calling Behold. And my guess is that's probably not a word that we use often in our everyday conversations. But you might. So how many of you have put up your Christmas trees already? Okay, a few, small handful. Well, when you were all done, you may have stood back, or when you get home today, you may look at your tree and say, wow, our Christmas decorations are a joy to behold. Or you may use it the way my mother-in-law did when she would say, well, isn't that a sight to behold? It's a word that roughly means look, pay attention, see. And as I said, we don't use it much in our everyday language. It's a word that may have crept into our Christmas consciousness in some way. But if you look at the Bibles that are here in our sanctuary in your pew racks and open them up to any of the four Gospels, you will not find the word behold in any of the Christmas stories. In fact, the only place you will find it in that version of the Bible is once in the Old Testament. And if you look at any of the more modern translations, you won't find it there most likely either. And if you do, it's just going to be a little smattering here and there. So how is it that this word, behold, has crept into our Christmas consciousness? I think it might be because of Linus and Charlie Brown's Christmas story. See, I think that would explain a lot, because as Linus recites the Christmas story, he tells it using the King James Version of the Bible, which was written and published for the first time in the year 1611. It's old English. And yet we seem to hold on to that for the Christmas story because of its poetry and its majesty and just the beauty of the language that it uses. So between now and Christmas Eve, we're going to be looking at texts, but we have to go to the King James Version to do so, that have something to do with this word, behold. We're going to look at texts like these. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Behold, the angel of the Lord appeared unto Joseph in a dream. Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted is God with us. And Mary said, behold, the handmaid of the Lord, be it unto me according to thy word. And the angel said unto them, meaning the shepherds, fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. And I can definitely hear Linus in that one. And behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem. So Christmas is a season for beholding, and we're going to behold or look at a lot of these behold texts during Advent. So the text for today is from Isaiah chapter 7. And I want to give you a little bit of background before we dive into it. It's the year 735, 732 before Christ. And a man named King Ahaz sits on the throne of a tiny kingdom called Jerusalem. You can see it on this map. It's the spot of land that is in blue, which is Judah, which is where Jerusalem is. Immediate north of that is the kingdom of Israel in white, and in green is the kingdom of Aaron. Now, King Rezin of Aram and King Pekah of Israel have decided to form an alliance to fight against the Assyrians who are coming down from the north. And they want to force King Ahaz to join them in their alliance. So they set out to conquer Jerusalem or to siege Jerusalem. And King Ahaz, quite frankly, doesn't know what to do. So God sends a prophet to him, a prophet named Isaiah, and instructs Isaiah to tell King Ahaz that he has nothing to fear. And this is where we pick up our text for today. I'm picking up, if you're reading along, in chapter 7, verse 10. But be forewarned, there's a bit of old English in here. So the Lord spake unto Ahaz, meaning God spoke through Isaiah to Ahaz, saying, ask thee a sign of the Lord thy God. So here Isaiah is telling Ahaz that he can ask God for anything, because God will be faithful to him and this kingdom of Judah. Ask it either in the depth or in the height above, meaning ask for anything you want. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, neither will I tempt the Lord. And he, meaning Isaiah, said, hear ye now, O house of David. And in this way, he's talking to King Ahaz, who is descended from the line of David. And he says, is it a small thing for you to weary men, but will ye weary my God also? Now, have you ever tried to help a friend and they just repeatedly resist your help? I have a friend who does that often, and it's wearying. So this is a bit of what's going on between God and Ahaz. But with the Assyrians bearing down and Aram and Israel wanting to conquer this little tiny kingdom, I have to wonder, why is King Ahaz so hesitant to ask for help? Could it be that he doesn't want to get his hopes up because perhaps he'll be disappointed? Or maybe he's had this vision of becoming this great king of Judah, and all of those dreams look like they might be at risk. We don't know for sure, but I wonder if at times we too are afraid to ask God for what we want or what we desire, because we think that by getting our hopes up, we too might be disappointed. And so next, Isaiah says to Ahaz something that just seems like it's totally out of sequence in the conversation. And he issues a prophecy and he says, therefore, the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Now I know if I was sitting in Judah and I had the entire Assyrian army bearing down on me, hearing a prophecy about some unknown woman and some unknown child probably would not give me a lot of comfort. So what can we make of this? What might Isaiah have been meaning when he stated or declared this prophecy? Well, first, I think we need to look at this word behold. In Hebrew, the word to behold, or the command to behold, is hene. And it's defined as this: when used in reference to the past or the present, it points to some truth that is either newly asserted or newly recognized. And with reference to the future, it serves as an important declaration. So we have this word behold, which is pointing to the past, the present, and the future. And second in this prophecy, we know that names mean things. Behold, a child will be with you and will be called Emmanuel, which means God is with us. And what Isaiah is trying to impress upon Ahaz is that God will be faithful. God has been faithful in the past. God has been faithful in the present. God will be faithful in the future. So no matter what the threat is that Ahaz was facing, Isaiah is saying to him, hold on. Have hope, Ahaz. God is with us. Now, many scholars, and I agree with them, tend to think that this prophecy of Isaiah's, which was issued around 700 BC, that the people who heard that would not have been thinking that their redemption or their salvation was going to come from a child born 700 years later, meaning Jesus Christ. With the Assyrian army bearing down upon them, they would be more concerned with what was going to happen in their immediate future. And shortly after this prophecy is declared, the Assyrian army bears down and conquers the tiny kingdom of Aram and the tiny kingdom of Israel. And you can see on this map the extent of the Assyrian Empire. It stretches all the way from the Persian Gulf up to the Black Sea, down to the Mediterranean. Huge empire. And down you can see on the far left-hand side in yellow, the very little bit of that is the kingdom of Judah. And Sennacherib's army has taken over Aram and Israel and also has conquered Judah. But the troops stop short of the city of Jerusalem. And then something very unexpected happens. Sennacherib and his army return home without a single loss of life. And we can hear the people of Jerusalem shouting and dancing in the streets saying, Emmanuel, God is with us. Now, if we go forward 700 years, there's a similar prophecy that Matthew pulls from Isaiah and all the way into his gospel. And he says, behold, a virgin shall be with child and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted is God with us. Now, this message is exactly the same, but the implication is different. You see, Jesus also will provide reassurance and protection and deliverance from harm, but not just for this tiny kingdom of Judah. The promise is that Jesus is for all nations and all people and all time. Emmanuel, God with us. In the words of Eugene Peterson, he says, the Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. And I love this song that our worship band sang this morning about God becoming one of us. God became a child that we could behold and hold. So what is it about Christmas and a child that we can behold and hold? In the Greek of the New Testament, this word behold is idou. It means to look, to perceive. And I have a close former colleague who is Nigerian, and her name is Idou. And I imagine that when she was born, her parents and God looked at her and said, look, see, behold this child, Idou. It's a translation of the Greek word to behold. What a joy. You see, when we envision having a child for the first time, we're filled with joy and expectation. We begin to envision what our child will be like, and what they will look like. If you're like me, you might wonder if they will love sports. You might wonder what they will look like and how their character will develop. Will they become a musician or an artist or a politician or a pastor or a scientist or a teacher? Will they be kind and generous to their friends? Will they be confident and courageous and maybe a little bit curious? Will they bring joy to us? And so we dream and we wonder. And as a woman who's been pregnant several times, we experience hope building up inside of us that gives us a sense of buoyancy. And I'll admit that later on in pregnancy, when you're packing on the pounds, you're feeling anything but buoyant. But I'm talking about a buoyancy of spirit, because we set expectations and we begin to hope for what the future might bring. Now, when our oldest daughter was born and we beheld her for the first time, my first thought was, wow, she looks a lot like Uncle Harry, who was my mom's twin brother. And his name was, quite frankly, a misnomer because he hadn't had a hair on his head the entire time I've known him, and our daughter was born perfectly bald. She didn't have any hair at all until well into her second year of life. During our classic service this morning, our bell band played an old hymn called "Lo, How a Rose Ere Blooming." And I was singing in the choir at First Presbyterian Church in Berkeley when I was pregnant with our second daughter, and there was something that stirred inside me as I sang that hymn, and I thought, if this is a girl, I think her middle name needs to be Rose. And it is. But I'll tell you, when she was born and I beheld her for the first time, she didn't look anything like a rose. She had a 3-inch long black mohawk that went all the way from her forehead to the back of her neck, no hair on the side of her head at all. So I got one born bald, one born with a black mohawk. And I will say that black mohawk did come a little bit handy the first Halloween, because I dressed her up in a Halloween pumpkin and I could put green wax in her hair and kind of twist it up, and it made a pretty awesome stem on the top of her head. But I say all of this to say that if we have hopes for how our children will look or how they will turn out, we may be disappointed. If we have hopes for the type of person they will become, we might be disappointed. And if we have hopes for what they will do with their lives, we might be disappointed. And as we enter the Christmas season, I may say that maybe we're all feeling a little bit that way. You see, we've come through a long season of disappointment. I recently heard somebody compare it to running a marathon, and we've gotten to 26.2 miles, and we aren't even at the finish line yet. And not only that, we don't even know where the finish line is, and so we have to keep going. We don't know what to hope for our own lives or for our children's lives or even our children's lives. We may feel like King Ahaz. We may feel like things are just bearing down on top of us that are out of our control. But what if we choose this season of Advent to behold? What if, no matter what our circumstances may be, we can see that God is moving in this world and God is very present with God's people? What if we're able to push aside all the noise and distraction that typically comes at this time of year and feels even more so because of what we've been through, and see that Emmanuel, God is with us? I want to close with a story about something that happened 2 weeks ago. On the Thursday and Friday before Thanksgiving, my husband David was taking a continuing education class in Scottsdale. And I decided to go with him, figuring I could work on this message while he was in class. And we had already picked the title for this series, Behold, and I had already picked this text from Isaiah. But I wasn't quite sure where I was going to be led by God to take this text. And as we arrived at our hotel, there was this huge Christmas light display. And I mean huge. The hotel sits on 65 acres. And these were some of the pictures that we saw as we walked to our room that evening. An enchanted forest, a saguaro cactus, some palm trees, a purple hippo, I have no clue about that one, and a blue whale with a pirate ship, and a slight nod to Christmas because the pirate ship had a flag of Santa on the top. But I have to tell you, I wondered what all of this had to do with Christmas. And quite frankly, I was confused by it because it all seemed jumbled and disjointed. And as we were walking, I thought, maybe this is just reflecting my inner state, right? That I'm feeling all jumbled and disjointed this season as well. Or maybe I was thinking it was a description of what the current state of our world is. And as we finally approached our room, we passed one last display, and it was this. It's an arrow that says, Nativity this way. And we checked into our room, and David pulled open the curtains, and he said, "You're not going to believe this." And I went over to the window, and right outside our window was a nativity scene. But it was way in the back of the property. And I'm not sure how many people who came to see these Christmas lights would ever even wander onto that part of the property. And so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to carry this image with me this season. Because the sign says, Jesus is this way. Jesus, the God child, is this way. God is with us. So what if we choose to have this be a season to behold? What if we use it to behold and to acknowledge that this text from Isaiah, a child will be born whose name is Emmanuel, meaning God with us. What if we reclaim, with all the noise around us, what if we reclaim that text for ourselves this season? What if we were to wake up every morning with the intention to behold and to see all the ways that God is present in our lives, or all the ways that God has moved into our neighborhood, or all the ways that God is one of us? What if we were to behold and see that no matter what our circumstances may be, the God who has been with us, who is with us, and will be with us is Emmanuel. See, Advent is a season for beholding. And God's world is pregnant with hope if we only stop and pay attention and behold a child. Please join me in prayer. A loving God and God of all time, we thank you for this promise that no matter what our circumstances are, you are with us. And so we pray that you will help us to encounter you in all the ordinary places of our lives, so that we can see you and know that Emmanuel, God, is with us.